will be adding our host here in one moment. Computer issues. But we're a friendly crowd, thank God. And we have an amazing speaker this day. In the meantime, I'd like to let you know that, oh, here's Reverend Oliver.
Yes. For the delay, had a computer glitch and couldn't get on for some reason. But anyway, welcome everyone. God bless you. I want to thank our dear brother John Jackson, Reverend John Jackson, who will be our speaker today. We happen to be in Las Vegas, and he brought up an issue that I thought was compelling, especially for what we have been doing in the last 50 weeks in dealing with violence in America. Violence in America seems like it's out of hand. It's getting out of hand on a daily basis, and we really have to deal with it. But one thing that we found out dealing with bringing extraordinary speakers on is that there are different avenues to addressing violence in America. And the best way we feel to really get to reduce the violence is to understand the root causes of various people who are perpetuators of violent acts. One of the things that we initially had started off with was gun violence. But gun violence, and I've always say a gun is an inanimate object. It takes a person, it takes someone to pick up that particular inanimate object and use it to harm another person. So what is behind the minds and hearts of that particular person becomes what we say a root cause. What is the root cause that caused them to pick up the gun? As I was saying before, so we've had extraordinary speakers on dealing with different areas of root causes and why people have become violent in their actions. However, I was with Reverend Jackson in Las Vegas, and we were sitting down having a conversation. And Reverend Jackson mentioned videos. And I realized that even watching my youngin' and those people, all of those videos are violent. They are showing you how to kill your objective is to kill someone, to kill that opponent, to kill that. And they have guns. They have all these destructive vehicles, if you will, for the destruction of another person or another entity. And so I said, Reverend Jackson, I would love you to come on because, when we think about some of the violent acts that are occurring with our young people, it probably is stemming from these video games that they are so entrenched in. You can't even pull them away from it. But just John Jackson, Reverend Jackson, is the co-chair of American Clergy Leadership Conference here in the United States. He's done a lot of incredible work in his ministry, working with pastors all around the United States. And also his major ministry is the family values, and how we can restore this world to become the world that God originally intended. So it's just my great honor to finally get my brother on here, Reverend Jackson, to discuss videos and violence. Welcome, Reverend Jackson.
Oh, Reverend Oliver, so good to be with you today. Good to be with all of you today. Thank you for having me. It was an interesting conversation we were having. I believe it started off with another thing that's really important to me, and I think that we need to have a serious discussion about, and that is the absence of men and families all across this country. If we see, I saw a video the other day of a boy. He was playing a video game, and his dad told him, "That's enough. Turn it off." And his son acted like his daddy hadn't even spoken a word. And he said, "That's enough, turn it off." And the boy just kept playing as if nothing was going on. And then actually, this was the stepfather, by the way, not his physical dad. So he said, and he walked over into the kitchen. I think he grabbed the biggest thing he could find and threw it into the television. And the kid flipped out and mother flipped out. And he said, "Yeah, mission accomplished, right?" So dads are going to make some kind of crazy difference. I don't know if that's the right one, but it definitely causes kid to take a little pause and realize, oh, I might ought to do what my father's saying. But today, what I'd like to share with you is how this effect is taking place on kids all across our, it's not America. This is worldwide. I read a statistic and every single poll says the average young person is playing video games 7.5 hours a week. And that's not being online. That's simply sitting in front of a screen somewhere playing a video game. And 80% of these games that they're playing, they're not all violent, okay? But even the ones that are seemingly not so violent, you're knocking down something, or you're breaking something, or but the ones I'm talking about, Grand Theft Auto and all these platoon style games where people are in a group and they're going around. These games are so dangerous, brothers and sisters. And here's some stats. So let me just show you some stuff here. I'm going to share my screen. We'll get to it. Can everybody see that? I believe so. So
yes, we can see it.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go back one thing here. Okay. So with these games, in 2018, there was a poll done by this was actually done by the Washington Examiner. And in 2018, they found out that four large countries, including the United States, analyzed 24 studies involving 17,000 children and concluded that children who play violent video games tend to manifest violent behavior such as fighting or hitting. And when I read that, I went, duh. I mean, if that's what you're doing all day, if you're playing these, and this is when I came home from school, brothers and sisters, I would watch things like, I would sit down when I came home from school and I'd watch Gilligan's Island after school, The Munsters, Petticoat Junction, but this is an entirely different thing. These young people are sitting on for hours and hours on video games, and most of them are fighting or shooting games, okay? So the reason I wanted to show you this slide as well as the text, listen to what it says here. According to the researcher from Seattle Children's Research Institute, those who are exposed to simulated violence are more inclined to act violently themselves and less thought to act empathetically. So look at this video game for a second. This is what's called a first-person video game. Now, you can play this game on your television, or you can do it in VR. Look at what you're seeing. The person holding the gun who's in front of you is the object of your fire, right? But you have a gun. And in this first-person view, it's just you're holding the gun yourself, right? So in this video game, every person who gets shot, it's not like you see an image of a character who's shooting another character. You are doing it. In the video game, it appears as if you're the one doing it. It's called, point of view. You're having like it's your point of view from everything that you see in the game. Every person you strike, everywhere you go, everything you do, it's your point of view. It's the perception is I'm actually doing this. And if you go into VR, it's full immersion, by the way. Full immersion. It's like everywhere you look, you're looking around, and that's what it is. So this guy's pointing the trigger at you. It's kill or be killed. That's how this stuff works. And by the way, the thing that really gets me, this is that point of view of first person view, right? It's kill or be killed in every single kind. The picture on the top, this guy has a scope on his gun, and if you play the game, this is what you do. You look through the scope and you zero in on one person, you pinpoint that, you take the shot, and you see the person get shot, and then they have video replay of a close-up of their literally blowing somebody's head off. Guess who are playing these games? I'm not talking, every one of these types of games are labeled mature. Every one of them. They're all labeled mature, and those games that are labeled mature, because the content's so mature, okay? Violence, incredible violence. Because that content is so mature, they label it mature, and anybody who buys a video game labeled mature has to be 17 years or older. If you go to Walmart, if you go to any of the box stores or any of these other stores, Best Buy or whatever, and you buy a video game, you have to show your ID to buy one of those. You have to be 17 years old or older to buy it. No child can do it. But online, through Amazon or in any other store like this, people are buying them all the time who are nowhere near 17 just because they got mama's credit card. And all of these entities know it, but they don't care. Gaming has also been associated with sleep deprivation, insomnia, all kinds of things, all kinds of disorders, depression, aggression, anxiety. Though more studies are needed, it says, to establish the validity and the strength of these connections, there has also been concern that exposure to extreme violence that is commonly found in these video games can desensitize teens and young adults to such violence. This is the last thing we really want to do, and it's causing emotional problems and even leading to young people committing acts of violence. Now, these kind of things, these are not my own words, okay? Every single thing I'm sharing with you today came from a poll, came from Harvard studies, thousands of people that they've studied. And this is what struck me about I went through so many studies before I wanted to present this. And there's a ton of stuff I could present, but I wanted to just share a few things with you. Number one, every single study said this. Every single study said, oh, these super violent games is commonly found in videos can desensitize our teens to such violence, and those teens will act out in violence. Listen to what it says in this Harvard Medical School study done in 2010. Blood and gore, that's what they call these types of games, intense violence, strong sexual content, use of drugs, that's all going on in every one of these games. And all these games, Grand Theft Auto is the worst. Oh my goodness, it's such a terrible thing. These are just a few of the phrases that the Entertainment Software Rating Board use to describe this kind of content in several games, such as Grand Theft Auto and others, right? One of the most popular games, this Grand Theft Auto is one of the most popular games among teenagers. So is Halo and things like this. The Pew Research Center reported in 2008 that 97% of youth ages 12 to 17 played some type of video game like this, and that 2/3 of them played action adventure games, which is almost always some kind of violent, cut them up or shoot them up type of game that tend to contain violent content. And by the way, not just violent content, very suggestive content as well. Okay, if you checked out of that, mature doesn't seem to quite cut it for a game like Grand Theft Auto, because there's a little bit of everything in there. And you think, well, what is that? So you're stealing cars? No. Well, that first of all, you're stealing cars, right? But also there's so many other things going on in that video game. You're interacting with people. All the women in the video are dressed so suggestively with very little on, so forth and so on, right? And the kind of actions that can take place, interaction that can take place in a mature game for 17 and older can get very, very graphic. Okay, I mean, it's such a problem, brothers. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to understand there is a whole industry out there, and their job is to get your kids hooked on this drug. And that's what it is. They're having, they've already, this is not John Jackson's point of view. They're calling this video game addiction. They got a syndrome for it and everything. And listen what it says here. In early April of 1999, this is a reporter. This is with the Washington Examiner. Listen to this. In 1999, I filed a federal wrongful death and product liability suit. This is a shooting that took place in Kentucky, where three families had lost their daughters. All right, female students were shot, and they were shot by a 14-year-old Michael Carnell, who had trained. Listen, that's interesting. That's interesting terminology. Who had trained on the most violent game at the time, a game called Doom. I just did a little research on the game called Doom. It was out there back in the day, and it's still popular today. It's got a facelift, I guess, but back in the day, it was crazy violent. We're talking about insane. Okay, chainsaws, killings, and every other kind of thing you could imagine. This thing took place, and after he in 1999, he filed this federal lawsuit. Guess what happened? 2 weeks later, Columbine took place. We learned about it. 72 hours later, what we learned is that these two young men had trained on the same game. They had been playing the same game, and you don't just play it; you play it for hours and hours, and that's what's going on here. Online retailers, this is what bothers me. This is really irritating. Online retailers don't check anybody's age when they're buying online. They say they do. They say, oh, you got to have a credit card. But if you're going to buy online, you got to have a credit card. And kids they have access to their parents' credit cards, which their parents are readily giving them. I don't know why. Sometimes they have their own credit cards. You don't have to, you can have your own card. That as long as you have that, you can buy these games. And they have their little disclaimer. Oh, we asked for that, but you don't need it online. Everybody knows that. Violent games, they're clearly marked mature, and children who are under 17 years of age are using them all the time. And these online purchases, they far exceed. This is why they don't do anything about it. The box stores, they're not selling as much in store, but they're selling more online. So they exceed the brick and mortar sales. So they have no interest in regulating these sales like you do for guns, like you do for other things that you buy online. They have no interest in going through those channels because that'll just cut back on sales. So it's not in their best interest to do so. It's for the best interest for our kids, for our families, but not for their pocketbook. It's all about money and revenue. So we have to do something. And if we don't do something about it, no one will. Here's how women are portrayed in these video games. They're over-sexualized, they're scantily clad, and that means they're half undressed, barely dressed at best in some cases. They're a vision of beauty. They just look like, oh my gosh, and they're subordinate to the male hero of the game. They're always put in an objective position. They're hypersexualized and in such an disproportionate way. Their body shapes are all voluptuous and this kind of thing, not normal at all. And it's very stereotypical. Okay, they're so one-dimensional. They're little sex babes, or they're little or something else. There are a couple exceptions to the rule, but even they are there for, that's called eye candy, and that's the way they do it. It's not, they play these innocent roles like of innocent and love interests or victims, right? They're also these really strong characters, and that's how they play towards their male characters, but also their image, that the image that these games give of women really has an effect on women who play these games. Very rarely does they give you a choice. You can be a male and female when you play a game. Men do everything, but women usually play the feminine role, right? And so a lot of times this is what you get. That's Grand Theft Auto right there for you. That's how women are portrayed in these games, and all of them, this, that, or the other. That's what kids are seeing every day. And that kind of stuff, when you see these combat games, like the ones up here, right? This type of game. These are literally platoons playing across the country together, working as a group to systematically go out and take out everybody. And you win or lose. There's no second life. You can come back into the game, but you get shot too, right? This kind of thing is so it's so visual. The visual, I mean, how visual these things are can't help but have an effect on a young person. There's just no way. And one thing that really irritated me also is all of these. I went and looked at. I must have looked at 50 different sites where a Pew, one of the Pew, what do they call them, surveys, or a Harvard survey, or where they tested and questioned and prodded and asked all these questions and about young people, and they got all this data, and every one of them say, oh yeah, these violent games increase violence and their aggravation to violence, right? Instead of looking for ways to solve problems that are with your mind, your most powerful tool, they always looked at ways to in conflict through violence. It caused young kids to fight at school more, especially young boys, things like this. But guess what? After they said all of that, you know what? All but maybe 3 of them said this. They all said, but there's not enough evidence. We don't have it. We don't have we can't make a conclusive, some kind of conclusion that these things cause violence because the evidence isn't in. Oh my goodness, come on. How's that even possible? How could people say that? In 2019, they were pointing at a violent game that 3 youths used, and yet they can't put 2 and 2 together. This has been going on for 3 decades now. Every one of these people, we had just this year, we've had 23 school shootings or something. It's ridiculous how many. This was unheard of years ago. What's the difference? What's the change? Well, the change is you see people like this young lady, this person, this trans person here. I want you to look what she's got in her hands. Look how she's going through that door. She's done that before. This person's not been in the military. Transgender too, by the way. This is another kind of dysphoria that's created because of this mess. Women don't see on the screen of these games who they are. They feel completely inappropriate. So what do? They trans into something else. I mean, it's crazy what they're talking about, and I've read so much data on it, and this is the kind of stuff that's happening. Where did she learn how to carry a gun that way? This person is guilty of shooting 6 people to their death. And I dare say, I'm serious. Every single time I look at something like this, I find out that this person was in their mama's basement or in their own playing video games to no end. Violent video games. Where they're, when you get a headshot, they got to give you an instant replay so you get a close-up of seeing someone's brains getting blown out. They see that stuff and it normalizes it and makes it like this is nothing. By the way, kid was shot to her death by two police officers as well. There's no doubt in my mind, and I mean no doubt in my mind, that this causes people It alters people. And there's a number of different reviews that says video games of this kind alter the mind itself. Violence in school is up. Disrespect for teachers is up, and all kinds of authority is up. That kind of stuff is the norm. And yet nobody, and here's what I've discovered, there must be one incredible lobby for this, guys, because nobody is calling it out. And when someone starts calling it out, guess what happens? They get shouted down. Again, here's the problem that I have with most of this research. I've done it and I've looked at it, and with the exception of just a few polls, all of them said the same thing. Violent games do have an effect on young people's aggressive behavior. However, there's not enough evidence to make the call on it. Somebody, now, maybe I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but the way it looks to me is someone is actually, who's got a lot of money, is paying people to not tell the truth. How many of you know when you put garbage in, what comes out? It's just plain and simple. But nobody wants to take these people on. Why? Because they have a lot of money, they got a bunch of lawyers, and they'll put you in court forever, and you can't afford such a thing. But guess what? Somewhere along the line, men, women of God, professors and others ought to stand up and tell the truth. This has an incredible psychological effect on our youth. This is how the military trains their soldiers. That's how these video games originally came about. So that soldiers would be desensitized because it was affecting them so dramatically when they would go into physical conflict. This helped them to get through that. Doesn't it make sense that it would also desensitize a young person, any young person who's playing it, or any older person who's playing it, to these kinds of things? Of course it does. We have to be wise. And by the way, it brings me back to my original subject. Mothers and fathers, sons, we got to do our job. That's up to us. We got to tell our, we got to explain to our children, listen, you can play a game. That's not the best game. You're 13. You're not playing that game. I'm not buying that game. And I don't care what you say. You're not old enough for that kind of content. In fact, those who are old enough for that kind of content probably don't need it. We got to stop, because the box stores aren't going to do it. They want to sell their product. It's going to be the parent who steps in or not. And the problem with that is an average dad only spends what? At best, 15 minutes with his son a day. It's ridiculous. We've got to do better than that. And preachers, we got to preach better than that. We got to teach this stuff at home. We got at our church on Sunday. We got to help fathers step up, even if they're not in the home. Just because you're divorced doesn't mean you can't be a good dad. You're not there every day, but the time you spend with a son or a daughter, it needs to be good. You need to take that time. You need to make that time. They need to be as important to you as the other things that you're doing. If we don't, what's going to happen is our kids are going to, right now, you can't go to, let's put it this way. You can't go right now to a restaurant and see a family dining where a little kid under the age of 2 has a phone in their hand watching a video. Why? Because the video keeps them quiet at the table and sitting in their seat, right? They're conditioned at the age of 1 to be doing this stuff. Remember when you have to go outside and play? They don't even know what that term means anymore. And so this is a serious business. And and what I've noticed with these statistics and with the people who are doing these polls, they're afraid to tell the whole truth. Many of them say they say these violent games will cause, greater aggravation and violence and so forth and so on, but they don't want to say there's conclusive evidence that undeniably states it. So what they do at the end of every one of their little reports, although they say all the right things up to that point, at the end of them, they throw the disclaimer out so they don't get sued. I was shocked. I thought, certainly there's someone here who can say it. They've all acknowledged it. Certainly someone can say it. How many of these people have to go into another school and do that, who've been playing these games 4 hours a day, 3 hours a day, 2 hours a day? I mean, whatever. Before we put 2 and 2 together. Common sense does not prevail. I'm telling you right now, but it should. And you have common sense. We should step up and do something about it. But I'm telling you, there are big money going around paying somebody to not do it, not stand up and take these things out. Do you remember about that? It's not just video games. Not just video games are part of it. But what about music? What about the music industry? There was a time you could never say in a song played on the radio the stuff that people are saying today. Oh, stuff so vulgar, I can't repeat it on this call. I mean, so vulgar that I can't even begin. I would never. Neither would you. And yet, these are the #1 hits in our nation that everyone's listening to. We have to gain some of our sanity back and start telling the truth and helping some of our youth understand, you know what? This is probably not good for you. I don't think this is good for anybody. You want to take a kid out and show them how to use a firearm safety, respectfully, with the right intentions and for the right purposes, that's probably a wise thing to do. But these things here, they're not doing anything at all. They're totally unhinged. Okay. And we allow these games to babysit our children for us. Sorry to say it, but it's the truth. There's, and this is not what's best for them. It's causing their grades to go down in school. We were talking about violence, right? But let me just be clear. Grade point average is dropping like it's crazy because of games. Everybody knows it. Why? Because they're not studying at home. They're playing games. So their grade point average goes down. Dropouts are more because they're not performing well in school. They start getting depressed, suffering from depression because they're not performing well in social. They're not working too good with their peers. They're not very social because they're sticking on a game all the time. This kind of things are happening. Guess what's happening? Kids aren't they're not, boys, by the way, aren't going to college like they used to. Colleges, mostly women are on college these days. They outnumber the boys big time. It's going to get more and more that way. And what happens is these guys get more and more depressed. And they said suicide rates with a gun, the suicide with youth today, talking about violence, is about self-violence. Women practice self-violence because they see these little tatas on the games, and I don't fit that mold. So they become depressed about themselves. Why aren't I like that? Blah, blah, blah. And then they do all kinds of stuff to themselves because they're depressed. Boys get depressed because they're not performing and they're not doing this and they're not doing that in school and other places in social environments. And so they get depressed, and suicide rates are almost doubled because of this kind of stuff. And 50% of all suicides, guess how they take their lives? With a gun. Want to end some gun violence? Start working on that. I'm telling you, this is important, brothers and sisters. And I'm just giving you like this. I'm not even getting down and deep on it. This is just basic common sense stuff. If we really get serious and we really do our homework, we'll find not only are they these, I'm talking about Harvard Health Medical Center did that survey. I read the whole survey, and guess what they said repeatedly? They said, yes, 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 yes. All these things have an effect on these young people. Yet they were not willing to say there's conclusive evidence about it. Terrified because somebody's going to come to sue them if they do it. I'm telling you. It wasn't, if it had just been them, I would have thought, but it wasn't. It was almost every single organization that did it, whether it be a federal government, a state government, or a university. And many universities did it, and they all came out with the same stuff. You could tell by the wording of the program what they were saying. They were afraid to go further. So I'll end with this. We have a lot of work to do, I believe. You got to be a part of it. It won't happen if I just say it, right?
Thank you, Reverend Jackson. That was a very, very powerful and compelling presentation. I'm quite sure everybody here and live, it was compelling. I wanted to say this, as you were talking and sharing about violence, we are looking not only violence in the video games, but there is extreme violence in all the movies that we watch that are very popular. There's violence in the sitcom, and actually some of the worst and nastiest words are on the common sitcoms that we watch every day. I mean, the F word is used it's like it's an everyday word. I mean, it's every movie, and then every beautiful, sometimes you watch these good dramas, excellent movies, spy movies, they're really well made, and then there's all of a sudden there's a LGBTQ relationship with the prime person, with one of the central person. So there's a concerted effort, as you had said, out there that is trying to destroy the fabric of the world, the moral
Reverend
fabric
Oliver,
of the world.
we used to be able to trust companies like Disney to give our kids clean entertainment. Those days have been long gone for 20 years.
Yeah, we can see that is so right. And Disney is on the forefront of fighting to continue to destroy the moral fabric of our nation and of our young people. So you're correct. You're I'm glad we finally got you on. And you did an excellent job. We want to thank you for coming, and I know we have many questions. It's interesting that when you start talking, Reverend Daryl Franklin had put on something he put on just before you started, and he said it's a sense of hopelessness when we become desensitized to gun violence. And I don't want to go, when you shared it, almost like, oh, this is almost hopeless, but I think that we do have a counter. And one of the greatest counter is that you said that the parents have to stand up. The preachers have to stand up. The communities have to stand up. And once we do that, I think we could be a very much more powerful counter to that.
Yes, sir. There was a time a father would say, hey, son, let's go throw a ball or something,
Well, kids don't, and not only that, it's right after the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, that even compounded more of kids staying on the computers and not going outside and do extra active curriculum.
That's right.
It's even compounded the situation even worse.
Yep.
I want to thank you again. So we usually have people that come in to ask a question and share some thoughts.
Sure.
All those who would like to share your thoughts or some more questions to Reverend Jackson and his thorough and very powerful presentation. The floor is open.
Reverend Jackson, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
We've been studying with our program every Wednesday so much about violence and crime, and family structure, many things, but I kind of forgotten this component. We talked about that earlier on, but the thing goes that they become isolated, and that's the very worst thing anyway in this scenario. But science really will show now that the brain has structures that are changed completely with this kind of a desensitizing on killing. And they're learning more and more about how the brain sets up structures inside that, you can't change them, so you walk out the door and you do what's in your brain, right? Which is violence and killing. And of course, they have no sense of worth anymore. But there's so many things that science is showing today on this understanding of how the brain works and how, repetitive actions will set course. And they know you can practice something in your head, just without even moving your body, and then you can act that out. And there's just so much to be learned from that. But I really appreciate your emphasizing these ideas, because they're really so proud. But to me, the thing is, why is a child on the computer so long anyway? Even if it was just some simple game, if they're on there, they're isolated, they're not being normalized, they're not being part of the real world, they're not making good relationships. So parents are at fault there. They're not taking responsibility, right? So anyway, yeah, thank you.
I totally agree with you. I think one of the problems that a modern society has, right, is we got it so good. A 13-year-old in the United States of America is nothing like a 13-year-old in middle South America. Why? Because they're dealing with different things. Kids in third world are 13 years old. By God, you're a man. You're living like a man. You're working like a man. You're not acting like a 13-year-old in the United States who's protected. Think about, I don't know how many of you on this call are unificationists or church people. Church people protect their kids so much that you can be 18 and leave the house, and it's like the first time you ever left your family. You don't have any experience in the world. And it's serious. Usually most young people's experience outside is when they go to college, and they lose their ever-loving minds in college, because they don't have there's no structure there for them. There's no parents there to take care of them. There's no one to say yes or no, or you can't do that. That's too much, or that's excessive. Don't do that. It might get you in trouble. Nobody's doing that. That's their first time experience. And that's why college has become, Little college in Conway, Arkansas, my kids told me, is party central #1 in America for a college. I'm like, how's that impossible? Problem I'm talking about is parents don't realize in America that we're taking some things that we have, luxuries and blessings that we have for granted, and we're allowing our kids the kids aren't doing the chores anymore. All kinds of stuff like that are happening, and we have an obesity problem. We got all kinds of problems like that because kids aren't that active any longer. And we really it's a parent's job to help I believe parents' job to help a child grow up and be successful out of the house. But we got mothers who don't want kids to leave. I'm sorry, fathers too. But these things are, an over obsessive parent who can't let their child grow up and become an adult is going to hinder that child's growth for the rest of their life. We have to understand how important that is. We're not teaching very well that way. We used to, but we're just not doing it today.
Have you heard this one fellow who talks about, he says that weak men are destroying America. And so that's what's going on.
Because weak men make poor society.
Yeah,
and poor society and difficult times make strong men, right?
Right. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, I've heard that line's pretty good. Yeah, I like it.
Thank you very much. Hey, Reverend Franklin, do you have a few words or statement or question we can barely see you.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. I just had to go into the other room. I tell you, Reverend Jackson, thank you. I really appreciate that presentation. That was spot on. That was right on. And it is so many takeaways from that. Because just about 2 days ago, my wife and I, we saw this incredible documentary. They showed a camera inside North Korea, the reality. I mean, these men had undercover cameras and they were risking their lives to show that undercover undercover coverage about the reality of the poverty. So many orphans, 5-year-old, 3-year-old children just left in the street just to defend themselves. I bring that up is because there needs to be a balance to be able to help our children understand how much blessing that they have. And you touched on that. You touched on the point that there's a tendency because we have much is to give much, but we have to understand that there is a certain structure that needs to be incorporated to understand the value of what they have. And then I'm just thinking how, yep, just regular, we cannot allow ourselves to just think that we're average and ordinary people. We cannot allow ourselves to be intimidated because we don't have PhD or whatever the case may be. The fact is that God has given each one of us a conscience, and we have to empower each other through our fellowship to read the word of God. And it's up to us. It's up to us. I had a conversation with one sister. She's involved in the Kombawa group. And, we're talking, and we say, you know what? It doesn't matter. We need to put our forces together and show ourselves up. We need to show up, regular men and women, just to show up. And this is too much. I can go into conspiracy theories, but at the same time, it's not, because there's documented evidence that there is a nefarious, deliberate effort to undermine the innocence of our kids. We saw this 2 years ago, and I showed this to Reverend Oliver, and we were working together. How this gay is like a homosexual choir, right? And they were just putting it right in our face. And you know what the name of that song was? We're coming to take your children. We're coming to take your children, right? So I saw this man yesterday, this preacher, and he was preaching. It's time for us, and you get it, Reverend Jackson, you get it. It is time to bring back Pentecost, big time, because one of the things he said, it resonated with me, and he said that how in the world can God's people be on the sidelines when Satan and his demons are on the front line? So it is time for us to show up. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend.
Really appreciate
Let's go. Thank you, Reverend Franklin. It's very powerful. Let's go to Dr. Madeline Alexander. Welcome, doctor. You're muted. Okay.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Reverend Oliver. Reverend Jackson, that was a powerful presentation. Thank you so much for sharing. I think one thing we have to keep in mind is violence begets violence.
Always.
Evil begets evil. And as saints of God, as sons and daughters of God, our voices, yes, have to be heard, but it starts in the family. We talk about cultures and the different things that go on around the world. But when we sit with our children, I know when I sit with my children, I'm going to look at my grandchildren and see that my children are raising their children the way I raised them. It appears that in this, the climate that we live in now, there's no boundaries. We talk about time on the phone. A 3-year-old sitting at the table, instead of eating dinner, they're looking at a video. Well, what is the parent doing? So we have to hold these
Giving
parents
them the phone.
accountable. Yeah, they're giving them
Parent
the
is
phone.
giving them the phone. That's
You know,
exactly what's going on.
and then when the child's not on the phone, the parent is on the phone. So the child is mimicking the parent's behavior. So the parent has to be held accountable. Then when we look at that, I worked with Healthy Families of America. And what I would do as a social worker is go in, observe the family, just be with the family to see their family dynamic. And then we would talk about some different things that would take place, whether a child was acting up, acting out, whether how the parents communicated, whether it was a single parent home, you know, and we talked about those dynamics. And it was my responsibility to allow them to see what was in them, what they were portraying to the children and what they wanted to see differently. So when we talk about the games, yes, we know that the television is probably the cheapest babysitter you can get.
Yep.
But are you monitoring what's on the television? I heard you talk about Petticoat Junction and Gilligan's Island, and you know, I'll go as far as to say the Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh, I did that
you know,
too. Yeah.
Yeah, those were pure shows. But as we evolve, things, I think the Bible says that the children of the world will become weaker but wiser. They're wiser because they come out knowing this concept of electronics. They're born with that. It's innate. They can adapt to it, no problem whatsoever. But give them a book, they struggle with it. And we came out reading books. We came out with the encyclopedia. We came out with the dictionary, and we had to explore those things. We had to physically touch those things. So when we talk about the climate that we're in, we no longer have boundaries. If you're not disciplined at home, you're not going to have respect for authority.
Anybody, anywhere. That's right.
You know, so, and we talk about the kids, but in talking about the kids, we have to address the adults. So
This is
how
right.
do,
You're 100% right.
you know, so how do we, I was a parent educator, and sometimes I had to track those parents down to have a session. Then you had those parents that would willingly come in because they wanted a different dynamic. They wanted to do something different. So the only thing that will flood out hate and darkness is love. So how do we engage authentically with love in our community to say, hey, we know that there's a problem. We want to address the problem without offending anyone. When we talk about church settings, when we have church, we invite the whole family. But I almost think it's time out for church as usual. It's time to start having gatherings where we can gather these families together. We can talk about their issues. We can talk about their problems, and we can begin to tear down those walls, put those boundaries back in place, but tear down those walls where we see everybody as the enemy, and build this place of hope. Build this place of love, restructure the foundation, or in some cases, we might even have to lay a foundation. But we have to get people to a place that they have value. You know, people talk about slavery, and I always say, if you know about slavery, those slaves were not given away, they were sold. So from the beginning of time, there's been value in our community. Think on that, and think about, as we have moved forward. And I watched the documentary the other day on Uganda, where there is some people there still fighting against slavery. But if we think about in America, Reverend Jackson, you said it yourself, we have too much, we're spoiled. We want, we think about it as, well, I'm going to give my children what I didn't have. But what's wrong with them earning it? My grandchildren still have chores. They still have chores. They have responsibility. So when we talk about what's going on the outside, we got to look at what's going on the inside and figure out how to assist the parents in their place of comfort or discomfort. But to really, true family values is like my favorite part of the unification of church. True family values. I think if every married couple, if even a single person, if they could understand the value of true family values and merge them in with their family values of yesterday, not of today, because today seems to be about a competition. But if there's ever a way to really give and support those with those true family values, I think the whole dynamic of family will change, and that will affect our neighborhoods, our communities, our cities, our states, in the world. So
Dr. Alexander, I have a suggestion.
Basic.
Next time we do one of these, you can help me make this presentation because I'm telling you that you're so right on it. So I really appreciate your comments. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. God bless.
Always. She's the backbone of this weekly webinar. So thank you so much. Very powerful. And it's true. Maybe you should do a tag team presentation on this. Thank you so much. We have our Reverend Dr. Michael Jenkins, who is the international president and president of UPF, U.S. president and international president, UPF, Universal Peaceful Federation, which is a sponsor of this webinar. And we'd like to have him come on and share a few words of inspiration that he has received from your extraordinary presentation, Reverend Jackson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Oliver, for this wonderful program. It's really gaining more and more notoriety as we go forward because the guests are just such special people fighting for peace and stopping the violence and also helping youth and families. So I thank you very much. And also, Dr. Jackson, thank you for a wonderful presentation. I think that there are so many different aspects, especially this whole area of suicide. Half of the suicides in the United States, in terms of gun deaths, half of all gun deaths are suicide.
That's right.
It's really tragic. And also, I want to thank ACLC because ACLC and UPF are collaborating on a program calling Back the Blue, where we support law enforcement. And we had a program in Chicago with my wife and Dr. Rouse and everybody. We really had a great program with the honoring women in law enforcement, and Dr. Rita Pritchett, who's an officer for many years and 53 years involved with Chicago PD, and as a chaplain and also an officer, really helped put that together. But on Peace Road, we're doing Peace Road now, and from the end of July into early August. And we had a wonderful program in 2020 with Dr. Jackson there in Dallas. It was a tremendous experience where the county sheriff came, or the county police chief came, and then also a representative of Dallas PD. And they were so moved. They were so deeply moved. That was at the time right after the Rodney or the Floyd, the terrible incident that occurred in Minneapolis. And we really thank you for ACLC involvement there, because I think that what Reverend Oliver is doing is bringing together the community activists that are rolling back the violence, working heart to heart with people in the community. Many of them are people that came out of the darkness into the light. And what Reverend Madeline said was so important. I think we've got to have God in this. We've got to have the churches come together. There's got to be a kind of an enlightening of people from the youth all the way into the elders. It can't be avoided because you can't take people out of violence just by restricting them. The problem is also inside our hearts. So I want to thank you for this program. I think that leads us in this direction. So thank you
Yeah.
very much, Reverend Oliver and Dr. Jackson and Reverend
Thank you,
Madeline.
Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for your comments. Reverend Jackson, as we conclude, I know everybody was really deeply moved by your presentation. It was a great presentation. I knew it would be
Thank you.
when we were sitting and discussing in Las Vegas. It would just give you the closing remarks, and then we will close the program.
I thank you so much, Dr. Oliver. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, and everyone who's on the call today. You know, if you had asked me, what is the one single thing that we could do that would put a dramatic dent in, you know, violence in general, right? Any kind of violence. But the one thing that we could do to help improve the stats that you see all over America in every different field, the one thing that we can do to make a huge change in those numbers, people going to prison, violent crime, you name it, is the two-parent family. Brothers and sisters, there's no bigger thing that we can do. The devil, can I say devil on it? I'm going to say it anyway. The devil has been working overtime to break up and tear down the two-parent family.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the family that God created, okay? That family, a husband and a wife, a mother and a father in the home makes the most significant difference. And all across the board, you can see, if you look at the stats, you'll notice that two-parent family makes an incredible difference on children graduating school, on teen pregnancy, on early drug abuse. Every single statistic goes down in incredible results just because of a two-parent family. You know, God made it to where men and women are both needed in the family. And if we can, you know, God bless those who are doing it on their own. And God knows they need all the support they can get. But when it's at all possible, that two-parent family will make the greatest difference in this battle that we're talking about today.
Yes.
That would be my encouragement for everyone here. If we could do that one thing, fix that in this country, what a difference it would make.
Amen.
It's closing remarks that we've had, and it's true. And we can see, as everyone has acknowledged, there's a very conservative, nefarious agenda to destroy the moral fabric of our nation. And we know that the pillar of any moral fabric of any nation, in any place, in any society, is the family, a two-parent home. And that is being destroyed incrementally. But as Julie said, and Dr. Madeline has said, and Dr. Jenkins and on yourself, that it's not over with until the fat ladies sing. That means so that means that we just have to rise up. If we rise up, we can become a very powerful force. And so God bless you, everyone. Thank you so much. Reverend Jackson, thank you. We're going to have you again, and we're going to talk again. God bless you. I want to thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
God bless. Thank you,
Hey,
Dr.
Reverend
Oliver.
Jackson. God bless.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
God bless.
Thank
you.
Dr. Madeline.
Thank you.
Jackson.
God bless
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Oliver.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
You all.
Reverend Jackson. Thank you
Yes,
very
thank
much.
you all.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Good to see
Very
you, Dr.
powerful.
Jenkins.
Yeah.
Thank you, Reverend
Thank you.
Oliver. Awesome.
Yes. Take
Excellent.
care. Have an harmonious week.
Yes.
Yeah,
See
you
you next
too.
week.
Thank you,
See you
Reverend
next
Jackson.
week.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
God bless.
God bless
God bless.
everyone.
Yeah.
All right, Reverend Jackson. Good. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anytime.
good one.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Get our tech savvy. All right.
Have a good laugh.
Yeah. Maybe we can get our tech savvy second generation to create new video games, huh?
Oh boy, that'd be wonderful.
Hmm.
Uplifting and pure and spiritual, maybe.
Oh yeah, without question. Without
That'd be
question.
wonderful. It may happen.
Oh yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Keep
Okay.
empowering each other with this conversation and say, God can work.
That's right. Amen. Amen. Keep at it. All right. Thank you, sir. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.